Welcome everyone. My name is Councillor Susie Horton. I'm the Chair of the Planning Committee. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start and safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Don't use the lifts, and assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. And if you did sign in downstairs with the Guildhall, please sign out on your way out for their fire regulations. Public seating's been made available, but this meeting is also webcast to allow the public to watch remotely if they wish. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including making those making declarations, although I've been informed that you're not if you're sitting over there. Members of the press and public are permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they don't wish to be recorded. Please can everyone speaking use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they've finished. A little bit about voting. When voting, members, please can you keep your hands raised clearly until the number of votes have been stated. Okay, we'll do some introductions. I'll start with councillors this week. So I'll start on the front row here.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Judith Smythe, St Jude Ward and Vice Chair of this committee.
Good morning, Mary Vallely for Casham and Mooring.
Peter Candlish, Eastern Craneswater, acting as standing deputy for Chris Atwell, who was originally not going to be able to make today.
Councillor Hugh Mason.
That's it on the members of the committee. Now I'm going to go to people and doing deputations. So if you could introduce yourself and say which item you're doing a deputation on, please. If you're just sitting there and you're not speaking, then you don't have to introduce yourself. Okay, I'll start. Are you doing a deputation? Yeah, I'll start with you.
Morning, Chair. My name is Jake Russell from Colditch Planning Consultants. I'm here to speak in support of the Duke of Buckingham and the next one on the agenda, 63 to 65 Albert Road.
Welcome. And anyone on the back row over there who is speaking and doing a deputation, could you introduce yourself, please?
Rebecca Crowe, speaking Duke of Buckingham.
Welcome.
Sharon Morris for the Duke of Buckingham.
Welcome. No one else there speaking. And the last person doing deputation is also a councillor, so I'll go to Councillor Atwell.
Good morning, Chris Atwell, St Thomas Ward councillor. I'm predetermined in the matter of the Duke of Buckingham, and I'm here to speak against the planning application.
Okay,
I'm grateful to Councillor Candlish for standing in.
Welcome. And now to other people in the room, council officers. If I could start with you at the back.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Morning, Chair. David Hodges, Head of Development Management.
Morning, Juliet Gill, Principal Planning Solicitor.
Anyone else who I should have introduced who's going to be taking part in this meeting? And welcome to other people who are not speaking as well. Are you speaking? Welcome. Welcome. It might be the microphone that's not... just for this moment, could you just move to the next microphone and just... thank you, sorry.
I got you. Yeah, Jeff Gibbs speaking for planning permission for two-way New Common Road.
Okay, welcome. Sorry about that. If you turn that mic off as well. Excellent. I think we've now introduced everyone who is speaking during the meeting. Okay. Just for clarification of the proceedings, each agenda item will be presented in the following order. The officer's planning application presentation will go first. Then any deputations will happen. Then members of the planning committee will ask questions and make comments, and then we will go to a decision through voting. Okay, so now it's apologies. So we have apologies for Chris Atwell for the planning committee, but as he's explained, he's doing a deputation, but he is being, Peter Candish is taking his place on the committee today. Councillor Raymond Dent has got, is going to be about an hour late due to personal reasons. And then, excellent timing, Councillor Hunt. Then there are 3 vacancies now on the committee as Councillors Matthew Cordy, Councillor Chris Dyke and Councillor Derek North have left the Portsmouth Independence Party on the 16th of October, but their vacancies won't be refilled until the next full council is met, which is on the 11th of November. But we do have enough councillors to be running this committee, and we are quorate. And I was about to say that Councillor Lee Hunt is going to be a little bit late, but he's just sneaked in here. Do you want to sit down and then introduce yourself? Oh. What I'll do while Councillor Hunt is getting set up and settled is I'll move on to the next item, which is declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest in any of the items on the agenda? Councillor Hugh Mason.
There is an interest. It is not a pecuniary, I think even a material interest. But I live within 100 yards of the premises at 65-67 Albert Road, and I have walked past them every day, virtually every day, for the last 49 and a half years.
Thank you for that,
Just
Councillor
for
Mason.
clarification, I spoke to Councillor Mason earlier and we decided it wasn't a personal interest, so he's just made a voluntary declaration.
Thank you. I think that's it on declarations of interest then. Anyone else? Introduction?
So, good morning, members, everybody. Sorry about inconvenience by a couple of scaffolders this morning. Wouldn't normally mind, but this morning made me a bit late. Anyway, so I'm Councillor Lee Hunt. I've been a member of this committee on and off for a long time, and my ward that I look after is Nelson Ward, which covers Damshore, Tipner, Buckland and North End. Thank you very much, Chair.
Welcome. The next item is the minutes of the last meeting. For those people who were here, do we agree that they're an accurate record of those minutes? Yes. One who was here? Yes. Okay, that's agreed then. Right. Okay, so we move now to item 4, which is the first substantive item on the agenda, which is the Duke of Buckingham Hotel, 119 High Street. And I will hand over to officers to do their presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application at the Duke of Buckingham Hotel for its conversion of the existing hotel and restaurant into residential to create 8 dwellings with extensions at the rear and works to provide bin and cycle stores. So this is the site on the High Street in Old Portsmouth. Lies within the conservation area. So the red line takes in the building as shown there. There's another building you'll see in some of the photos here, which is within the blue line, so it's owned by the applicant but doesn't form part of this current proposal, and we understand it's part of the letting rooms, but is not being permission is not being sought for that particular building in this scheme. So this is the existing layout of the site, where you can see the buildings cover the entire footprint. The proposed layout will create a cycle store to the rear with external cycle stores and some landscaped areas to the rear. So this is the existing property, and so 4 stories, very consistent with the broader character of the street, as you'll see from some of the later photos. And as you'll see from the rear, the four-storey element of the building is all set towards the front, and then it steps down with this large flat roof to the rear. And this is the building just been discussing, which lies outside of the application site. So currently on the ground floor, laid out as a restaurant/bar, and then on the upper floors we have letting rooms as a hotel with a variety of rooms with en suites. So in terms of the proposals are to convert the entire building to residential, to create 8 separate units. That'll be achieved by an extension to the rear. So as viewed from the front, there will be effectively no change. This door, as we noted in the report, gets replaced by a soft closing door, and then this door, which will serve a bedroom in one of the flats, will be fixed shut. So the extension will be to the rear, so that it's shown in render to match on the walls, and then with this recessed mansard style roof above in slate hung to match the existing mansard on the building. So how that looks, go to the bottom slide first, how that looks from Highbury Lane on the east elevation. This is where the additional balcony extension will go. Some openings are added into on the ground floor to service flat on that side, and some additional windows open here. And these are shown obscure glazed due to a privacy relationship, which we'll show you in some more detail in a second. This is how, this is not a view that you would actually see apart from in the adjacent block of flats to the south, but the principal difference is that above the existing boundary wall that you have here, you would see this mansard of the proposed extension. So going to the layout, there's an existing basement in the property that will be retained and kept as storage cupboards for the units. On the ground floor, main entrance here on the left-hand side, 3 units created on the ground floor. We've highlighted on this slide, these yellow parts are roof lights that have been incorporated into the flat roof of the building. This was to increase the light and ventilation for these units. This is sort of east-facing, but largely single aspect unit, and then north-facing on the rear. And again, to try and improve the light and ventilation for the occupiers, these roof lights have been added. They're difficult to see on the floor plan because they're just a sort of faint square, so we've just highlighted those there. So 3 units at ground floor, and then above on the first floor, on the left-hand side here, have a 2-bed unit and a 2-bed unit to the rear. Second floor, very similar layout, and then at the top floor, the final 8th unit is contained within the existing roof space. So moving on to some of the impacts of the scheme. So the site lies within the conservation area. The conservation area appraisal, which the council has adopted, acknowledges that the majority of the high street is mainly post-war, but where there are still remnants of the earlier buildings and some are listed. So the weight which is attached to the impacts on the conservation area is set out in some detail in the report. The building itself is not mentioned in the appraisal and is not identified as contributing particularly to the conservation area, but has a neutral impact in our assessment. And due to the sympathetic nature of the additions to the building, we're satisfied that that overall impact to the wider character of the heritage asset and also the setting of wider listed buildings is acceptable. One benefit of the scheme, this is not a through route for vehicles, but obviously is a pedestrian route. The proposals by introducing openings into this blank flank elevation of the building provide some natural surveillance over this area, which will be a benefit. Also, it removes the open storage of bins to the rear, which will be contained within a purpose-built part of the scheme to the rear. So just to give you, again, some context of the building. So the building is here on the bottom slide, and then looking back the other way on here. And you can see the variety and the scales and the materials and the character of the street. In terms of those views from the actual, from the high street, very little change will happen in terms of the building itself. And most of its impacts will be seen from the rear and the views along Highbury. So these are taken from within the property itself, so this gives you some context. These are the buildings to the rear, and then the properties fronting Highbury Lane along here, which you can see a mix of more modern and traditional cottages along there. So one of the issues that we've looked at in quite some detail is the relationship with these properties just due to the north. So they face onto the street. It's a fairly narrow street. This is very much typical of the pattern of development in the historic core of the city. We have relationships which you wouldn't see in perhaps a post-war suburban setting. Nonetheless, we still have, as part of our criteria, the need to ensure that there's adequate living conditions for occupiers as a result of the scheme. So my officers have been into the site, stood on the balconies that you can see here. We're looking at that outlook and view, so you can see the existing sort of four-storey scale of the building at the top. And then at the bottom, this view will be the one that's most affected with the first and second floor extensions projecting out from there. And you can see that relationship is fairly close currently at the moment. In terms of that as an impact on light and daylight and outlook, the applicant has submitted this assessment, which is what we would call the 25-degree rule. So where 25-degree line drawn from those apertures doesn't break the proposed building, which you can see in this case it doesn't, then under the BRE guidelines we can expect an acceptable level of daylight and sunlight and outlook to be retained. It's accepted, obviously there is a change in terms of this view when looking out over this particular aspect. Nonetheless, the test is about the overall living conditions rather than what you can particularly see, and is there an acceptable outlook and daylight and sunlight from those rooms. So the applicant has sought to reassure us on those issues that is will be acceptable. Just some more views. So this is from the residential units which are to the south of the site, and as you can see, there is a very high boundary wall of these properties here. There is, and as you've seen from the elevation from the top right, if the scheme goes ahead, you would see the mansard roof projecting above this area here. There's no openings in there, so we're satisfied in terms of privacy. Looking at the scheme, that would also obscure this current opening looking backwards. Whilst we've looked at in the report, there will be a degree of impact to particularly this window in the bottom right due to the being able to see that increased bulk of the roof extension there. But overall, as it retains an outlook over the remainder of the rear gardens of the properties and to the let me get my bearings right, to the north, we're satisfied that there's an acceptable outlook retained, and any impacts from that, it's not sufficiently overriding to warrant refusal of the scheme. Just to sum up, Chair, we've drawn attention in the report in particular to the issues around parking the issues around the heritage impacts, but principally around our housing land supply and delivery, and particularly the issue of the tilted balance, which is engaged due to the underdelivery, significant underdelivery of housing in the area, and also our current failure to meet a 5-year housing land supply. So what that does mean is the tilted balance applies and less weight is applicable to our policies, and that does need to be borne in mind in weighing the merits of the scheme, in that there's an expectation that sustainable development in sustainable locations like this will be approved unless there is a significant overriding harm which outweighs all of those benefits of providing more residential accommodation to meet the shortfall that we currently have. So with that, the application is recommended for approval. And just to confirm that there are no updates from the SMAT, Chair.
Thank you for your presentation. Before I go on to deputations, I'd just like to welcome another member of the committee to the meeting. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Councillor Raymond Dent, Copner Ward.
Welcome. We said you'd be an hour late to you, so you got it quicker. So thank you for that. Can I just check whether late arrival, missing the beginning of the presentation, would preclude Councillor Dent from engaging with this item?
Yes, Councillor Raymond Dent will need to wait till the next application.
Okay,
because
thanks.
he's missed
Just
part
thought
of the presentation.
Thought I'd check because you missed the beginning bit. Okay. Right, deputations. So the first deputation is from Rebecca Crow, who is objecting to the scheme. So you have 6 minutes, Rebecca.
Okay, I'm nervous of public speaking, so I will be reading this. I hope that's okay. I'll put my glasses on.
Can you pull the mic towards you a bit
Yeah.
more? Thank you. Thank you.
We've submitted our many objections to this planning proposal 3 times since December 2024, but for the purpose of this deputation today, we will limit the areas on which we will speak because of the very short time available to us. I want to go directly to 8.33, which is the bins and rubbish and recycling section. The rubbish and recycling section of the proposal refers to an existing collection point. I would ask if the planning officers or any member of the committee can describe to us where this existing collection point is. If we cannot establish what the current collection point is, how can we judge if it will be suitable for the 4 bins of varying size the build requires, or if the correct area is being used? The area behind the Duke of Buckingham is adopted highway, except for a 3-metre section of pavement at the back, which is owned by the Duke of Buckingham. Currently, the 1 bin owned by the hotel is moved around on the cobbles of what is highway, and there is no fixed existing collection point. We'd also like to point out again that when the bin store doors are open, they will overhang the pavement. I now go on to parking, 8.41. It's stated repeatedly that the Duke of Buckingham have, and by implication use, 18 visitor parking permits, and that therefore, when the apartments are built, parking pressure will be alleviated. But there's been no scrutiny of this assertion. The hotel only has 13 rooms, and the manager of the hotel has frequently been heard to boast that he doesn't bring a car. The other staff, who are all cleaners, do not bring cars. We know this because we live opposite and see it, but we also conducted our own surveys by nightly counting the hotel permits displayed in vehicles in the KA zone. At most, and at their busiest, for example, the Victorious weekend, they used 7 permits per night, but in general it was more like 3 to 5, sometimes much less. It's hard to see how Robert Neve's 105% parking capacity could have been arrived at in any accurate way without first establishing exactly how many parking permits are actually used, if that same assessment is to be the base from which to extrapolate what will happen when permanent residents of the 8 apartments have permits. The parking assessment has, in our view, very shaky foundations, and our requests for information as to how it was assessed have not been answered. 8.43, increased use of Highbury Street. Our 16 years lived experience in Highbury Street is what informs our contention that the road will become busier, noisier, less pleasant, and more damaged. We've experienced 3 different pub landlords, the hotel all year round, and the very popular and much missed pizza restaurant. When guests arrive in taxis or their own cars to check into the hotel, the cars come up Highbury Street. When cars come to pick up pizza takeaways, they used Highbury Street, as did delivery vans, Deliveroo vehicles and DPD vehicles, despite the fact that the entrances they wish to access are on the high street. Engines are left running under our windows, the parking space is blocked, and vehicles are parked in front of our garage. They do this because it's difficult to drop off or park temporarily in the high street because of the pay parking, the junction at Peacock Lane, and the zebra crossing and zigzags very nearby. It follows that when residents move into the flats and need to drop their shopping, get their takeaways, groceries, or furniture delivered, the vehicles will use Highbury Street no matter where their entrance is. Based on our experience, there's no reason to hope or believe they won't do so in greater numbers and with more regularity than now. And this is a more general point, but it's very, very important to us. It's difficult to define what amenity means in planning terms, but we do regard the loss of a view of the cathedral, the open sky, and passing ferries as a loss of amenity and a significant deterioration of our quality of life. I would suggest that anyone in this room would object to a proposal that steals the view, which was a large reason for buying a property. Lastly, we'd like to say that we have no objection to the redevelopment of the Duke of Buckingham in principle, as it's become an eyesore about which the owners should hang their heads in shame. A similar project with a reduced impact on the neighbourhood would be supported by us. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, Rebecca. The next person to speak also to object is Sharon. You have 6 minutes, Sharon.
Hello. I'm representing the Friendsville Portsmouth Association, a group formed after World War II with a current membership of 170 households. I'm covering 3 areas due to the time: Highbury Street, its use and amenity, the quality of the accommodation, particularly the lack of ventilation and light, and the parking stress. Many times it is stated that there is no change to the High Street facade as all the development is at the back. However, the development is severely detrimental to Highbury Street, a busy, cobbled pedestrian through route used by many St Jude's school pupils and is the most direct route to and from the Gun Wharf, Dockyard and the Harbour Station transport hub. It is also the chosen route for one of the old Portsmouth tourist trails, taking visitors who have just seen John Pound's workshop down a cobbled street to the old bank and past the many listed buildings of St Thomas and Lombard Streets to the cathedral, avoiding the increasing traffic in the High Street and the 1970s development in that section. The application proposes large extensions to the first and second floors of the property, a transformation that would dominate Highbury Street, affecting the amenity value to the pedestrians passing through and reduce the light to the properties opposite. The mandated cycle racks are screened by high planting and a space that can already be quite dark, further enclosing the route and making it more oppressive. The conservation area extends beyond the High Street. It is recommended that extensions should be subordinate to the original building. Planning was recently refused on a ground floor extension to a house in St Thomas Street, citing depth, height, over-dominance, overshadowing and loss of light to adjoining properties. The proposed extensions here are over-dominant and impact far more properties and far more people. Conservation guidelines are concerned about overdevelopment and adequate amenity space. There is no outside space for this conversion. The bite stores, racks and screening could be further visual clutter, impacting a key pedestrian route in a conservation area. For the ground floor conversion, most of the windows are fixed shut. Despite the lighter design changes, the proposed new extensions into Highbury Street remain inadequate, with half-obscured glass and a fixed shut for security and privacy reasons. The first floor extension is stepped back to reduce its dominance. This allows fixed roof lights to the ground floor flats. The ones over the bedrooms would need integral blinds. The ground floor back windows are screened by high planting to offer some privacy and hide the occupant's view of the bike storage. The front flat has the non-opening windows along the High Street. All except the top floor apartment has an interior bathroom, so will always need artificial lighting. Mechanical ventilation will be needed for all the apartments to provide extraction for the bathrooms and kitchens, all to the back, especially where all the windows are fixed shut. I would question the suitability of the ground floor conversion as residential accommodation and the loss of ground floor interest and amenity. This doesn't promote a good standard of living or give the occupants decent indoor air quality, as advocated by the Council's draft clean air strategy. The report asserts that the 13-room hotel has 10 FTE staff and benefits from 10 business parking permits, which are apparently available for guests. I'm unsure how, as vehicle details have to be supplied. In any case, few of the hotel guests are observed to bring a private car. The FTE staffing level lacks evidence and may not reflect reality. 8 flats mean at least 12 cars. There is no new parking. So how to justify that this application will reduce parking pressure requires considerably more scrutiny. The substitution of transient commercial parking with persistent residential demand in a high-pressure conservation area warrants more rigorous and transparent analysis. This is a requirement of PCS 17. These numbers risk distorting the baseline against which the residential impact is assessed. This assessment is compounded by the Council's reliance on the out-of-date Lambeth method for this calculation. This assumes vehicle dimensions that no longer reflect the reality of today's car fleet. With so many SUVs and EVs, the actual usable parking capacity is significantly lower than reported, undermining the validity of any parking stress survey that fails to adjust for modern vehicle sizes and things such as EV charging points. But even using this outdated method, Old Portsmouth parking is already oversubscribed. FUPA believes that this conversion would be detrimental to the Old Portsmouth conservation area and would provide an unfortunate precedent for future development. We ask you to refuse this application in its current form. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sharon. Spot on with timing as well. So the next deputation is from Jake Russell, who's the agent. So you have 6 minutes as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, good morning, Chair, members and members of the public, and thank you for allowing me to speak today in support of the application at the Duke of Buckingham. The proposal represents a thoughtful and much needed opportunity to bring a now vacant building back into productive use, providing 8 high quality homes in a highly sustainable city centre location. It also preserves the character and the character of the Old Portsmouth Conservation Area, Now, as the officer's report has confirmed, Portsmouth faces an extremely serious housing shortfall, delivering just 26% of its required homes over the past 3 years. The city currently has less than a 5-year housing land supply, and against that backdrop, this modest scheme makes a real and immediate contribution to meeting local housing needs. It makes an efficient use of a brownfield site in a highly sustainable location, and every one of the proposed flats meets national space standards, for example. The design has been carefully developed to respect the conservation area and nearby heritage assets. All extensions are to the rear with matching materials such as cream render and natural slate, ensuring continuity and sympathy to the existing building. Now, the officer report concludes that the scheme would cause less than substantial harm to the area, but this is a conclusion that we do not recognise, given the extension would be entirely screened from view from the High Street, which is obviously the most prominent viewpoint in the conservation area. But ultimately, the officer report does conclude that any perceived harm is outweighed by the clear public benefit of delivering new homes and securing a building's long-term future. Now, importantly, this development will also create an improvement to local amenity. The previous use of a hotel and pub/restaurant generated regular deliveries, noise and refuse being piled up on the street. Now, the new scheme will reduce traffic movements, includes a proper enclosed bin store, and introduces secure cycle storage to encourage sustainable travel. Both the environmental health and highways teams have raised no objection, noting the positive impact on local conditions. And obviously, while the loss of the hotel, pub, restaurant is regrettable, the applicant has demonstrated that occupancy levels have declined significantly since the pandemic. With several other hotels operating nearby and a new one recently approved in the city centre, the balance of public interest now clearly lies in reusing the property for housing and not allowing it to stand empty and deteriorate. It should be noted that Portsmouth's adopted local plan does not include any prescriptive policy requirements when it comes to the change of use of pubs, restaurants, hotels, and so due weight needs to be given to that fact in taking the decision. Now, in summary, it's a high-quality, well-considered proposal that aligns with national and local planning policy and provides sustainable development, preserves heritage assets, and contributes to addressing Portsmouth's housing crisis. I just wanted to, if I've got time, pick up on some of the points raised by members of the public. So, bins are to be stored internally and moved to the external courtyard to the rear of the property on collection day by a private company. That's a common method of dealing with waste in tight city centre locations. On parking, the lawful use as a pub, restaurant, hotel would generate significantly higher traffic movements than the residential scheme for 8 units would have. Obviously, it's also the case that the Office for National Statistics provides data that residents of small apartments in sustainable locations like this are far less likely, to rely on private cars because of the wealth of public transport methods available to them. On views, it's well-trodden ground that in planning law there is no right to a view. The correct means for assessing outlook from residential properties is the BRE guidelines on 25-degree lines, which, as the officer pointed out in his presentation, the scheme complies with in its entirety, and so we can conclude that there is no loss of outlook and no loss of daylight to the existing residential properties. And in terms of amenity, I think it's just worth pointing amenity to the proposed flats. It's worth pointing out that in dialogue with officers, we've gone to lengths to try and to improve, optimise the amenity available to the flats, and obviously officers were happy to recommend approval. So we'd commend them in doing so. And so, on that basis, I'd respectfully ask Planning Committee to support the officer's recommendation and grant planning approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your deputation, Jake. And the final deputation is from Councillor Chris Atwell from St Thomas Ward.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. I find myself in the unusual position of sitting here rather than with you and colleagues this morning. And I do so because Councillors Ian Holder, Mark Jeffrey and I believe this planning application is inappropriate in this location. And here's why. Impacts on neighbours. The office, I've read a different report, I think, perhaps. The officer's report admits that the proposed development will result in an impact, which is planner speak for harm. This proposed development will harm the outlook for the occupiers of 120 High Street. This development will also, according to the report's author, mean that residents with rear-facing windows in neighbouring Portsmouth Town Court will be able to see the additional height of the second-floor mansard to the northeast. Colleagues, loss of an outlook is a material consideration. Consideration 2, traffic and highway safety. There is no off-street parking, as we've heard, and the residents' parking zone is operating at 105% capacity. It would be helpful to understand how many permits this actually equates to. Yesterday I was in a meeting when it transpired that a different residents' parking zone in Southsea is operating with a similar oversubscription. And that actually meant that 300 more permits had been issued than spaces available. What does 105% mean in KA? Also, colleague, the report suggests this development will open up parking spaces within the area. Those of us with local knowledge will, well, there's no credibility in that statement that the scheme will decrease parking demand. If it's helpful for members to know that traffic and parking is such an issue in and around High Street that Portsmouth City Council has spent in excess of £20,000 over the last 2 years on heritage bollards to help resolve problems with idling and pavement parking in the area. And disappointingly, damage to Highbury Street cobbles is green lit in this report. Surely we should not be granting permission for planning applications we know will damage the unique road surface in this historic area. Design and appearance. Colleagues, the report recognises the single-storey element at the rear of the plot would, under the proposal, be notably enlarged to accommodate the first and second floor extensions. We believe this development will cause unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of the Old Portsmouth Conservation Area through overbearing massing, rear extensions and upward additions, which are not justified by any modest public benefits. A fourth material consideration is conservation, and this particular conservation area is considered to have a high degree of significance. In light of this, the proposal's principal impact or harm, the proposal's principal harm is on the character and appearance of the conservation area. It is agreed by the report's author that this scheme would cause a modest degree of harm to the character and appearance of the Old Portsmouth Conservation Area. Portsmouth City Council's own guidelines tell us that schemes should preserve and, where appropriate, enhance the conservation area, not cause harm. Approving this application is contrary to Portsmouth City Council's own guidelines. As an aside, a 2019 court ruling, Hall versus Bradford, means decision makers cannot dismiss even modest levels of harm as irrelevant. The case means you must give considerable weight to conserving this asset, even when the harm is found to be modest. Economic impact, another material consideration. It is noted that the proposal does result in the loss of a hotel and a pub and restaurant, and that there is an economic impact associated with the hotel closing, including loss of jobs. There's a bizarre sentence, I think it's a bizarre sentence, in the report about planning permission being granted for the hotel in Slindon Street, and I'm not entirely sure how that helps justify the loss of the Duke of Buckingham as a hotel, pub and restaurant for Old Portsmouth. We've also, colleagues, spent time very recently discussing the importance of active ground floor uses to bring footfall and vitality to the High Street. Well, this is literally the High Street. And were the application to be approved today, it would result in a loss of active commercial space and reduce the area's economic function. Members, please refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Atwell. That brings us to the end of the deputations. So now we'll go over to members of the committee for questions. Councillor Hugh Mason.
Thank you. I have a number of questions about this. The first one, the most worrying, is the ventilation. I look at apartment 1 and the bedroom and the living room appear to have no external ventilation whatsoever. So that's one part of the ventilation question. The second one is that in the officer's presentation, he mentioned the roof lights as providing light and ventilation. How will they be configured so that they provide ventilation? So there's questions of ventilation, not merely of the apartment 1, where I think it is a serious consideration, but also in the other apartments.
Thank you. Can you just, it's helpful, Chair, if I speak to the plans. So I understand the concern is in relation to this unit. If I go to, so I think the first instance, let's tackle your second question. So the units behind have windows and roof lights, so the windows can open to provide ventilation. The roof lights provide additional light to those units. Even if those weren't opening, they would still provide. They still have ventilation from these openings on the side and the rear. And my understanding is that ventilation will need to be provided through these openings at the front in order to pass building regs. So there's no reason why, from the design and of the scheme, why that can't be made to provide opening lights to provide ventilation for the scheme when they reach the building regs stage, Chair.
Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Mason?
Yes, perhaps it's because I'm going slightly deaf in my old age, but I didn't quite understand how, at the front of the building, if you are maintaining the front of the building, you can get ventilation into that first flat, because the door is shut, and so far as I can see, the windows are non-opening.
So just to help in terms of the front elevation, so we do have this glazed area here, and it would be entirely feasible to make these lights at the front opening to provide necessary ventilation to meet building regs. So I don't see that as an unsurmountable problem for that particular unit. As far as I can see, there's no reason why they can't provide an opening light within that glazing for the benefit of the occupier.
You say it is feasible, but it is not in the plans which are before us, and we only have to judge on the plans which are before us, surely.
Well, we should be careful of veering into matters that are not the planning committee and the planning process is concerned, and are concerns for the building regulation detail approval at the later stage. So all we need to be is satisfied that there is a way in which that unit can be ventilated in order to grant it, and there's no reason to conclude that it couldn't. If it was a blank wall and there were no openings, I would agree with you, but as it's a glazed frontage, there's no reason from my point of view why that can't be achieved when they reach the building regulation detail stage.
Okay, we're still on questions. Councillor Smythe.
I'd like to ask a supplementary question on exactly the same lines. I was concerned by what the plans and the report said. Could we therefore put a condition on to make it subject to the provision of natural ventilation to those front rooms, in fact, indeed to all rooms, as part of a planning approval, should we decide to give it?
Chair, the short answer is you can, but the other short answer is you don't need to, because building regs will cover it. But if members were concerned about that, they could add a condition.
I would remain concerned enough, just advance warning, to add such a condition when we come to that stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you. So, very interesting, this. I really want to know what it would look like. I mean, this is an important area for our visitor economy. So what sort of, I'd like to know what the window might look like. I don't like how it relates to the ground in any way, in any case. But I want to know what the window would look like in a conservation area, and the details do matter. Would it be leaning inwards or opening outwards? Is that the sort of resolution we're looking at here, or something that slides up and down, and how it relates to the conservation area and the street scene? I actually think it is important, if you don't mind.
Chair, as advised, sorry, you don't need that. No, it's fine. Apologies. Chair, as advised, we don't have that detail. I think my answer to that is, does the nature of how that light open, whether inward, outwards, up, top hang, bottom hung, is that the difference between approval and refusal of the scheme in terms of the merits, bearing in mind it's a detailed technical matter which will be dealt with at the building regulation stage.
Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, you go then. I'm in my own queue.
I know we members have absolutely no idea what we're talking about. It seems increasingly so. Are these plastic windows, or are they going to be wooden windows, or some kind of sash window? This kind of stuff does matter in a conservation area, you know, how things change, the small things change, so that when visitors come to look at ancient old Portsmouth, they see something that actually does look a bit ancient. I know it's changing. I mean, I did live there for a long time too. But I'd be grateful for that clarification, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chair. The clarification is it isn't changing. That's the scheme is to convert the building as shown with the openings that you have as shown in that picture above. So that's the intention. There's as little intervention as possible into the building in terms of the frontage. The proposal is to convert it as is, leave those openings, leave that in effect what was a commercial frontage, pub, restaurant, however it's been used, intact as shown on there. So there's as little intervention as possible on that particular elevation.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I suppose my question is a combination of those that Councillor Smythe, I think quite sensibly said that it would be a condition about having opening windows. Are we doing how does that relate to the conservation bit? That's what I'm confused about. So it could be that that is a condition and the developer goes away and creates opening windows, and then that has an impact on what our concerns around the conservation area. Or I think normally, in principle, you'd say a window is buildings control, but in a conservation area, is that not a different consideration? Because it's not just about whether the window's open or not, it's also what it looks like in a conservation area.
We can add that to the condition, that the opening whilst preserving the character of the building.
I just want to check that out.
So let's take these new, because these are the proposed changes, and these are inserted into the wall here. Obviously, we've got a building which is neutral in its appearance in the conservation area. It's not a historic building. It doesn't have historic openings with sash windows and the like, which we look to replicate. So, in effect, what you would get if the scheme was approved was, as shown here, where you've got these two-pane lights with the brick headers above. And in terms of whether they opened from whether they were sliding sashes, whether they opened from the side, whether they opened from the rear, all that mechanism, in effect, sits behind the window, so you don't actually see that. So you would only perceive that actually when the window was open, and in the majority of the cases, reality is it'll be in a closed position. So you would see it as it's shown on the plans. So I hope that helps.
Are there more questions? Oh, can I go to Councillor Candice? Just got in just before you, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Mason.
So I've actually got two questions, both of which I hope will be quite short. So firstly, on the diagram that's shown up, the statement on the slide in respect to the basement says access is shut, but yet the presentation says there are storage units down below. It sounds to me that as long as there is no attempt or possibility of that turning into a lived room, that is actually a good use of a basement area. But I always bridle a little bit if I see something on the screen that is not kind of in line with other things. So maybe I misunderstood that, but that's what I saw. And the second question is around the bins. So there have been several comments around the bins. In truth, I'm less interested in where they were for the hotel in the past and more about where they would be in the future. Can you just show us on one of the maps where these are and how they relate, how a person living in one of these flats would relate to getting them out to the bin, and then from the whatever bin storage there is to wherever the collection point would be by the refuse truck?
Yes, so first question first. So my understanding is the basement area exists, so they're seeking to make use of it by turning it into a series of storerooms for the occupiers. It's annotated here as being blocked off to the area to the rear. And then there will be an internal access. Now, again, a detailed matter of whether that area needs more than one room of escape would come down to building control, but it would be feasible, obviously, to provide a secondary way out. In terms of your kind of later fear of sort of residential use, it's not part of anyone's apartment, and it isn't served by any form of natural light at all. So any scheme to use that down the line would need a further further consent, which should have control over. So moving on to the bins. So the bin storage area is in this top right corner here. So currently, and my understanding is the bins are just stored outside in the yard to the rear. So there is purpose-built area for the bins. I think the reality is if you're living in one of the units and you want to fill it, you're going to have to go out the building into the store and down the lane and pop them through the doors there, because that's the main way in and out for most of the units. There's a individual access to that unit. And then also just draw your attention to condition 4, which requires a waste management plan for confirmation of how those details will work in reality in terms of collection and the like.
You okay, Councillor Candlish, with that?
Yes, sorry, I was thinking about it. So, so we don't have the waste management plan available to us now. Okay, I get that. And I am digesting the fact that the reality, which is kind of what I was picking up, is that they will actually have to go onto the street, along a street, turn left, all the way around and back in to put something into the bin store. I mean, that is just a fact of the way that the thing is. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mason.
My one was actually quite similar to one of Councillor Candlish's questions. I noticed that the second entrance, which is from the basement, access to be blocked shut. This only leaves one entrance to the building. Is this safe? In case of fire or other problems, there would only be one way out of the building. Is this acceptable?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. Yes, so there are exits for one of the ground floor units can exit as its own entrance and exit. So the entrance is serving the remainder of the flats. In terms of that safety aspect, again, that's a detailed technical matter for building control to consider. There's lots of fire prevention and safety measures that they will insist upon as part of the scheme in relation to creating the new units. So, but it is a matter for the later technical stage in terms of determining on that issue. If, in the event that their assessment was it needed a further means of escape, then the likelihood that would need an amendment of the permission if it was granted via a non-material amendment or minor amendment to change the internal layout. If it was required a second means of escape, that may cause significant change to the internal layout, and they'll be looking at a revised scheme. But it would be a matter for building regs to deal with.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Councillor Valley.
Sorry, I can't see on here. Is there a lift? So there's 4 floors, no lift, so no accessibility for anybody disabled?
It's not again, it's not a requirement at this height to install a lift. Yeah.
Any other questions before we go on to comments, members? Councillor Hunt.
Very briefly, I'm sorry about it, just for context. I mean, Mrs. Crowe or Miss Crowe, she mentioned what it was used for, which is a pizza place. Is that was its most recent use? So it was popular or something. I wondered how that worked in there. I know it's not to do with it, but it just interesting.
I don't know.
It's not a question.
No, I'm only going on. We have to judge it on the basis of the lawful uses.
All right. All right.
It's worth noting, Chairman, that one of the objectors noted that it was not very good pizza anyway.
I think we're straying into areas beyond planning. So now back to looking at comments or listening to comments. Councillor Hunt.
Chair, just before we move into the comment stage, I just think it'd be helpful to clarify a point. In Councillor Atwell's deputation, he inferred that where we refer to impact, that's a shorthand for harm. So that's not correct. All schemes have impacts. It's not possible to build within the city without having impacts in terms of the character, the light, traffic, all these things. They're all impacts. You can have impacts and approve a scheme. The issue is whether that strays into a harm that's overriding and outweighs the benefits of the scheme. So it's just important to make that distinction. If we're talking about an impact, that's not necessarily a harm. All schemes have impacts.
Thank you for that clarity. Okay, I think Councillor Hunt had his hand up before I was overrided, so I can go Councillor Hunt and then Councillor Smythe.
All right. I'm most grateful for the presentation today, and particularly the planning officers stressing that we have to look at the national planning policy framework in regard to this property and how we consider what we're going to do today. I mean, everybody must understand that there is an overriding presumption in favour, which has grown stronger more recently under this government and the National Planning Policy Framework, that is in favour of all development, unless there's something in the local plan. If I stray here, I'm sure the planning officer will put me right next. Unless there's something overriding in the local plan or something that overrides the presumption in favour, the strong presumption in favour of all development. So I am mindful of that, first of all. So then I looked at it and I listened to Councillor Atwell's deputation, and what I do is I often put myself in the shoes of the person living next door and wonder how they would feel. So and I completely agree with him and the deputations that the mansard roof would have an adverse impact on the residential amenities of next door 120 High Street. I don't think there's any question about that. It's not a case of outlook or anything like that. It's the adverse impact on the residential amenities that they currently have. And then also the views from Portsmouth Town Court would change. The mansard roof seemed to me would be behind this building, so not have a massive impact on the character of the conservation area. And there are these sorts of, I mean, the High Street, let's face it, in Old Portsmouth is dotted with all sorts of different buildings from the 50s, 60s, but way back to the goodness knows when. It's all very different. So I thought about it a lot since we've been going through it, and it is that mansard roof, for me at least, and its adverse impact on the residential amenities of next door at 120 High Street, and their right to have enjoy the residential amenities that they have right now. And that, I feel, on balance, does overweigh paragraphs 8.19 and 8.20, and that to me is important. It may not be to anybody else, but how it's impacted them is particularly important. So I think that I've written some more notes here. As I say, I would like to go along with the conservation area approach, but I don't like the way that the building relates to I mean, I can't find any planning reason to talk about at all, but I don't like the way that the dead frontage is caused by this, but when you look at it now, it's dead frontage anyway, and that's just a matter of fact. And it would provide housing, but I think it goes too far, and I think that mansard roof, I have stressed it on the residents next door at 120 High Street, is and will have an adverse impact on their residential amenities. That's it, Chair.
That's a proposal for refusal. Okay. It was Councillor Smythe next.
I think with this particular planning application, there must be very few people in this room who haven't drunk and enjoyed a sometimes rowdy evening in the Duke of Buckingham, and I think it is always sad to see that sort of thing going. On the other hand, I have in the past experience of living near a pub, and that's not that easy. There's always people being chucked out late who are a bit drunk and very noisy, and I think we would have sympathy if this application was coming in for a pub with the loss of amenity for residents. I think that we need to put if we're going to approve it, which I will recommend, we need to have a condition that says, subject to a condition that the adequate natural ventilation is provided to the rooms, particularly of flat 1, taking into account the need to preserve the appearance, the external appearance of the building. I would find it personally very, very difficult to live in a place that didn't have natural ventilation, and I think that's a very serious thing that affects the occupancy of the flat and the health of the residents, and that must be one of our main considerations. And actually, in general, the flats look livable and comfortable and generous for people. So I think particularly in areas that we all know, those conservation areas, we all feel change is difficult, but I'd like to propose the conditional approval of this application, which will provide much needed accommodation in a way that, in my view, doesn't detract very much from the amenity of the surrounding areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
I will second that proposal. It is difficult, I think, to reuse any building, and especially a building in a conservation area. I think that this, despite some shortcomings, is a good reuse of the building. I think it is important that we should insist as a condition that some form of natural ventilation be provided to all living rooms. On other matters, I recognise that there will be some problem for the residents of Highbury Street by the extension. They will lose the view of the cathedral, which is regrettable, but I don't think that the view is, unfortunately, not a planning consideration. Perhaps I wish it were, but it isn't. And so I don't think we can take that into consideration. So I second the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Canlish.
So, like several other people on this committee, to be truthful, I'm torn. I think it shows the value of a review like this in a public meeting by local councillors who have a real understanding of not just the technical aspects of the matter, but also where it sits in a local area. And one of the reasons I've stepped back from being on planning is because I can see that that is being gradually eroded, and I'm afraid the proposals will soon see that such decisions are not made in such a forum. Nevertheless, we are where we are today, and we've got an opportunity to say something. I've got comments on a few aspects of this, and in particular about traffic, since I'm the Cabinet Member for Transport, so I can answer some of the questions that were raised here. I think one key point is one raised by Councillor Mason, which is that what we really want to avoid is a building like this falling into emptiness and disrepair. That's absolutely dreadful for any area, and a high street in particular, and I think that is a risk. The world is changing. There's some discussion about whether students or ordinary people should be living here. That's not something that we can control. And secondly, you get pluses and minuses with all groups. So I actually live on the seafront in a converted nightclub where there's no lift to get up to the upper floors. And it faces many of the same challenges that are being spoken about here in terms of parking and stuff. One of the things that is true is that actually a lot of these properties, again, whether we like it or not, go to second homes. and Airbnb use. So actually the number of people who are located in the area with a car is actually smaller than you might expect. My block has many more flats than there are actually cars associated with it for that reason. I'm one of the few full-time residents in it. Although I do absolutely agree with the comment about cars getting bigger and that being more and more of a problem. Our streets, particularly in areas like this, were just not designed for 4x4 Land Rovers parking there. And because it is such a nice area, that I think would be some of the sorts of people who would be able to buy and would choose to buy properties down there. On a technical basis, there have been questions about the capacity and the 106%. That calculation is essentially driven by multiplying the number of properties, postal address properties in the parking zone by 2, and then the number of permits that relates to this. So in this instance, this is saying that there are slightly more than 2 permits issued per property within the area. There are other areas of the city where this ratio is even higher. There are increasingly few other areas where it is much lower. But I absolutely do agree that parking down there is a real problem. And again, it's a seasonal thing. You know, using that local understanding, going beyond the technical, it is not much of a problem on a wet evening in January, relatively. But in the middle of summer, it's an absolute, no, wrong, improper language for the council hall. It is very difficult to do. That all said, what other comments did I want to bring out? There's discussion about the importance of cobbled streets. You know, I think that's just the nature of the modern world. If we want to keep cobble streets and we want to keep those available to motor vehicles, it is very difficult to control who goes up and how people use it. You're not going to be able to stop people ordering a pizza to be delivered. Now there's no restaurant on site, but that's true whether it is someone in their hotel room getting something at the end of the day, or whether it's someone coming back after work and just wanting to order something up. So yeah, I'm on the horns of the dilemma because I actually do see that as a single standalone property, this looks like a reasonable conversion from a building that could fall into emptiness and disrepair into some much needed local accommodation. However, it is in a conservation area, and I do agree that there will be some harm caused to local residents. But unfortunately, planning is usually balancing off competing harms, and there is a harm of not having more properties available in the city for more people, although the numbers and the percentages that are quoted actually, again, relate to the central government imposing them on Portsmouth rather than Portsmouth actually wanting them to be a particular number in a particular place. So I'm going to listen to anyone else and then come up with my decision as to which way to vote in the last moment.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else want to comment? No, I think for me, I'm slightly challenged. I'm always challenged by the overdevelopment of these things. I just think that a different development on the ground floor could have really helped the challenges that I have around the less than ideal refuse collection and the access that we've talked about. But I have to keep coming back to the fact that we're in a planning committee meeting and we have to do what we can within planning. So I'm hoping that if this does get approved, that the conditions that are listed and the additional one that we're likely to put on, but particularly around waste management, are really, really considered, you know, with all seriousness about both the people living in it and also neighbouring properties. So I think that's just the comments that I wanted to make. Does anyone else want to say anything before we go to we have a proposal before us? No, okay. So we have a proposal from Councillor Smythe, seconded by Councillor Mason, which is to move officers' recommendations with an additional condition around adequate ventilation, not just for flat 1, but actually for all living areas. I'm guessing there's some planning speak that we could couch that in, but with sympathy to the conservation area, that's the key point as well.
Yes, Chair. So basically, prior to our first occupation, that we require details of the opening lights and means of ventilation to each unit in the development.
Thank you. In which case, members who can vote on this item, all those in favour of moving officers' recommendations? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? 1. And there can't be any extensions. So that motion is carried and planning permission is therefore granted. Thank you to those people who've done deputations. Are people happy to carry on just moving through? Okay, so the next item, which is agenda item 5, is 63 to 65 Albert Road. Are you doing all of them today, David?
My colleague will come over for the last two,
Okay.
Sam Kushner. No,
All right, so
yes.
over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is a scheme at 63 to 65 Albert Road for the extension and conversion of this existing commercial unit to retain a commercial use at ground floor and then create 6 flats on the upper floors. Apologies. So this is a site here at the junction of Chelsea Road and Albert Road, so with an Albert Road address. Facing this 1980s development, Keys Court, and it's the corner plot with the frontage to Albert Road and then return along Chelsea Road. So just to take you through a couple of the constraints on the site. So the purple, looks at fairly purple movie areas, are the boundaries of the conservation areas in the vicinity. Particularly the report has talked about the impact on the setting of the Campbell Road conservation area to the north. Site is the red star there, so it's outside of the conservation area. It doesn't physically affect it, but potentially affects its setting. And then the gold star is the King's Theatre, which is grade 2 star listed building. So obviously, clearly of great importance. And just on the other constraints, so the scheme talks about the flood risk issues on the site. So the left-hand side is the current area of flood risk. So in an extreme event, it would be within flood zone 2 up to the frontage of the property. But with climate change and, the site location has not come out well on the slide. With potential climate change, and this is in our undefended scenario risk, it would be at risk of a severe event in the lifetime of the development. But we see we've addressed the flood risk issues in the report. So this is the current property. So it's all in commercial use. There's no existing residential uses above. Excuse me. As a result of the scheme and the extensions, the remainder will remain as commercial at ground floor. An entrance for the flats will be created off of Chelsea Road here.
I was going to say, I think you need a little bit of a drink.
Apologies, yeah, I thought that might happen. So this is the existing elevations of the site. One thing just to note, obviously when you look at the proposed elevations, there's a significant increase in scale and bulk because there's 2 stories added. But as you'll see, the scale of properties in the vicinity of comparable height to with the proposals that you'll see, where you can see the much greater height and scale of the building opposite. Existing floor plans all as in commercial use, and so the proposed elevation. So an unusual feature of the scheme is that the extensions to the building don't extend round to this green area here. This has been deliberately cut back during our negotiations with the applicant in the interest of the living conditions of the units above the adjacent property on the Albert Road. But the building will be built up, the 2 floors, so the top floor will be, not dissimilar to the previous scheme actually, set back with a mansard style roof to lessen its bulk and impact, but it will be very much taking up the existing commercial character as the building, replicating these crystal style windows of the building, and you'll be able to see how even when we're up to a 4-storey building, it still compares to the property directly opposite, and as you'll see from some of the photos, is still lower than the block on the opposite side of the Albert Road. So what does that mean in terms of layout? So ground floor commercial is retained over the majority of the building. There's rear access along this lane for bins servicing in here. The flats have their bins and cycle store bin store access from Chelsea Road, cycle store access through the entrance into the site, and then this is the entrance up to the flats. And then at first floor we have 2 2-bed units, so one on the back and one onto the front, and then moving up through the building it is further 2 2-bed units on the 2nd floor, and then at the top floor where it's slightly less footprint, we are 2 single-bed, 2 1-bed units. Going back to some of the issues that have been raised in relation to the previous scheme, you'll be able to see with this site all of the units are dual access. In fact, some have actually 3. So it makes use of both the southeast, north-facing and west-facing lights to provide dual aspect units in each case. And you can also see on here on this rear unit, there's openings to these elevations there, and also on the front-facing units as well. So this is shown in section. This does make it, as I say, shows the substantial amount of increase that would take place to the building itself. But as we've explained, our view is that's within the scope and scale of buildings in the vicinity, and is actually bringing the building up to something which is noticeably lower than its neighbours, to something more akin to its neighbours. Just to highlight, I just want to get back to, where's my elevations? Sorry. Yes, I just wanted to highlight in terms of the existing building, does have a series of openings on the north, on the back, facing up towards the Chelsea Road properties. And you'll see from the report that certain of these openings we've looked to have as sheer glazing on this elevation and also on the west elevation facing out here in the interest of privacy of neighbouring properties. So just moving towards, this is a CGI of how the scheme would look, just to take you down some views to show you some more of the context. So the site and the building in here, you can see the much greater scale of the Keys Court to the south of the site. This is the locally listed terrace at number 1 onwards from Chelsea Road. So we're in the conservation area here, and this terrace is also locally listed. So these are the aspects that we've looked at and in some detail in the report in terms of the setting of the heritage asset. Just some views of the existing building. So I'm reliably informed the building was built in 1950, although it looks much more like it's an interwar building. the scheme will reflect that industrial character, that partly industrial commercial character that it has. In terms of, again, you can see the nature of the surrounding buildings. This access, oh no, I'll move on to the next one. So there's an access way here. This will provide access into the bins for servicing. For the commercial unit, there is a residential unit right at the end, this is number 1A that's referred to in the report, which is set down this access track. And then this is number 1 Chelsea Road, which again, we've addressed that in some detail in the report. Our understanding of these 2 windows, these are only 2 windows in this side elevation, is that this front one is a secondary window which serves which is the same room as this dormer on the front, and that's a bedroom. And then the second window, which you may not be able to quite see, but is behind, our understanding is that serves a bathroom. This property hasn't actually objected, interestingly enough, but nonetheless we have given due consideration to those impacts to the property. Just on this issue of privacy, I just want to make a correction I noticed this morning in relation to the condition. So in condition 7, it talks about the obscure glazed windows, and it refers to the more easterly facing window in apartment 3. And I think actually what we want to do is amend the westerly window, because actually I can't quite see it. This is the one which would look more directly towards the window in the side elevation of number 1 Chelsea Road. So it's actually this more westerly window that we would seek to obscure glaze. This window, due to its position, just rather more looks over the front drive of the property. So apologies for the error in that. Just the last couple of things in terms of impacts to the properties. So the applicant has done a shadowing assessment. There's a lot of detail in this, and it doesn't translate, I'm afraid, well to a slide, so I'll do my best to kind of explain. This is the difference in terms of the summer impacts. Now, they are less, there's a less obvious difference during the summer impacts because the sun's more overhead. So this is the existing scenario, and then with the increased height and bulk of the property, you can see that actually the shadows don't reach the nearest property there. So there's a greater impact during spring and autumn, where you can see this is currently the shadowing that's caused, so it sits over the access track to number 1A at the back, and there will be an additional shading from the spring and autumn areas, but principally over the driveway of number 1 rather than over any particular windows. And then this is the most significant impact during the winter issues, the winter sun path, where at 12 p.m. where it's south. So this is the worst case scenario. As you can see, the existing buildings cause a shadow over the terrace, which runs down here, and there will be increased shadowing over the roof of the terrace. But in terms of where their principal outlooks over the front, there's a degree of impact there, and we're satisfied that that's an acceptable impact, bearing in mind the existing shadowing that would occur at that time of year. Just checking, yes, so we, from the SMAT update, you'll see we have an additional objection, but that didn't raise any issues that weren't already covered in the report. And with the amendment to condition 7, we recommend the scheme for approval, Chair.
Thank you, David, for the report. So we'll go on to deputations now. We have one deputation, again from Jake. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak in support of the next item, which is obviously 63 to 65 Albert Road. The proposal, in our view, obviously shows an excellent example of how we can make better use of existing brownfield sites to deliver both new homes and hopefully sort of reinvigorate the commercial use in ground floor as well. which obviously was not possible on the Duke of Buckingham, but in this case, due to the sort of established shopping area that is Albert Road, the applicant is relatively confident that there'll be new operators waiting in the wings to take that commercial use at ground floor, which is great. As your officers has put, it's creating 6 high-quality new flats on the upper floors, and we believe reflects the exact kind of sustainable mixed-use regeneration encouraged by national and local planning policy. I won't rehash all of the blurb from last time on housing delivery, but as members and officers know, it's urgent, and I think these sort of schemes of gentle densification in sustainable locations are an important piece of the jigsaw in that respect. The design of the proposed development has obviously been carefully considered to respond to its surroundings. While the scheme does add 2 additional stories, the height remains consistent with neighbouring properties, as your officers put, stepping up modestly from the corner of Chelsea Road. The use of quality materials, including the matching brickwork and the sort of ultra-low profile Crittall style windows, and the traditional red-tiled mansard roof, ensures the extensions complement the street scene, respects the nearby Campbell Road conservation area, but also I think pays homage to the existing building. I think the development will also provide real environmental and amenity improvements. The scheme reuses an existing building, reducing embodied carbon, and includes modern waste and cycle storage facilities. And obviously by locating homes this close to shops, services, frequent public transport, it massively encourages walking, cycling and reduced car dependence. Exactly the kind of sustainable pattern of living promoted in the Council's climate and transport policies. Any concerns about parking, noise, flood risk have all been addressed in full through the planning process, and Highways team raised no objection, noting the site's excellent public transport links. So in short, we believe this is a well-designed, policy-compliant proposal, makes an important contribution to Portsmouth's housing supply, whilst maintaining an active commercial use and improving the appearance of this prominent corner site. And I therefore respectfully urge members to again support their officer in granting permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. There's no other deputation, so I'll go straight on to questions. Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you very much. The Crittall windows, are they going to be metal, or are they going to be so they're going to be proper metal Crittall windows? Will they have interior glazing on them as well, that sort of thing?
No, I was going to say my expectation it would be that they would clearly need to be double glazed units for insulation for the properties. So you would only end up in that kind of scenario of retaining the windows as is, without no alteration in like a listed building where you had a particular reason not to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
I have a number of questions. I'll run through them. Firstly, the ground floor, which is going to be commercial use, I do not see where there will be water supply or toilets there. It just appears to be open space. This might be of some importance, so where will be the water supply? Secondly, questions of windows. Quite frankly, is it sensible to continue using Crittall windows, which are for usually industrial commercial purposes, in a redevelopment in a residential area close to a conservation area? Is it sensible to continue to use Crittall windows? Thirdly, question of parking. Paragraph 2.5 says that this would be eligible for permits within the MD parking zone. When did our policy change? Because with 147A Albert Road, which we considered some few months ago, we were quite clearly told that Albert Road lies outside the MD parking zone, and so parking permits would not be available. The last question concerns overshadowing. Am I right in thinking that at 12 noon, for most of the year, there would the basement windows of 1 and 3 Chelsea Road would be overshadowed, because these are living rooms, they are not just cellars. That is a living room in the basement, and would these be overshadowed? So 4 questions: ground floor, windows, parking, overshadowing.
I'll apologise if I forget any in the middle. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. So, yes, refreshment amenities for the ground floor unit. There's an existing toilet within the building that gets removed to provide the entrance to the flats here. It's not shown any form of kitchen, toilet for the commercial unit. It'll be connected to the mains. There'll be no reason why they can't install that as part of the scheme for an occupier. So it's a minor detail from our point of view, but it's entirely feasible that could be provided for a commercial occupier, and anyone and the developer, if they're worth their salt, will clearly want to do that if they credibly want to be able to rent out the unit. Crystal windows. So crystal windows. I'm going to give you both my personal and professional opinion here, that I think this is a well-considered way of dealing with the property, and actually preferable to ignoring its character and simply, say, rendering it over and putting modern large aperture windows into the block. I think they, in terms of should you have that design of window, there's no reason why you can't make an entirely useful, thermally efficient unit with metal frames that reflects that design and provides both the light and ventilation that an occupier will need and will need under building regs. And it's just been adopted as an integral aspect of the scheme, and in the same way that we've retained this attractive shopfront to the building as well. So no reason in planning terms not to adopt the Crittall style, because with the benefits of modern technology and materials, we can make the openings look pretty much like anything that we want to. Shadowing. So the shadowing exercise, as I say, shows virtually no difference during the summer time. In terms of the sort of greater impact, again, this sort of throws this additional shadow. This is the driveway of the front of the property, shows this additional shadow over the driveway of the front of the property in the spring and summer. And so your principal additional impact is during the winter here. So as you see, there's already shadow cast over these areas. I imagine from the scale of this building, in actual fact, rather than the building on the side. So the additional impact, so this is the access way in. This is a terrace here. Sorry, as I say, detail is difficult. And this is the front garden, which is, I understand, is a parking area. So you can already see that in terms of this, there's a basement window in that location there is shaded already. Basement window in this location will still be shaded, because that's the nature of the lesser light that you would get during the winter period. So the additional impact, is to say, is mainly in this area here, and that's principally sitting over the driveway of the property. So having balanced that, we're satisfied with that outcome, and that it's an impact, but not an impact that warrants refusal of the entire scheme. And what was the fourth question? I knew I'd forget one.
Before we come to that, looking at the design and access statement, the design and access statement would seem to suggest slightly more overshadowing than is shown there. This is quite interesting. But the fourth question concerned the change in parking regulations.
Apologies, yes. I think just to be clear, because this subject does tend to come up a lot about eligibility for permits and whether a parking area is oversubscribed. Just to be clear, when we are not basing our acceptability of these schemes, and previous item was another case in point, on the availability of residence parking. So we our assessment and our impact and the also the views of the highways officer as well is that in this particular location a zero parking provision scheme is compliant with policy. So how the council operates its own car parking permit policy is a separate matter for that department, but we don't base our acceptability on this scheme on whether someone can apply for a permit or whether they then have an address which is an Albert Road address or a Chelsea Road address, and whether that somehow makes a difference. Due to the sustainable nature of the location, the accessibility of public transport, the accessibility of public services, all on foot, and with the cycle provision provided. As I say, our recommendation isn't dependent on whether they can apply for a permit, Chair.
I don't think that was the question. The question, and it might be that Councillor Candlish can come in. The question was about, sorry, if I can help clarify, that it states that highways have confirmed that the occupants of the development would be eligible for permits with MD, and Councillor Mason was saying that residents on Albert Road are not in MD. So it might not be something that planning needs to sort out now, but I do think it seems to be an inconsistency, and it may impact the people's views on this scheme if they consider that they're in a parking zone.
Okay.
Sorry, that isn't a comment, but I was just trying to clarify the question. The question wasn't the principled thing around oversubscription of parking zones, which was the situation.
It is oversubscribed, and it always will be.
Yeah, but that's not the question, is it?
There is a danger, I think, if I might comment on that, that if there is now a change in the way in which highways are applying this, this will open the door to everyone on Albert Road applying for parking, because parking permits.
Okay.
And so I think that we need to get, whilst it is not a matter for planning today, we need to get clarification before the buildings are let.
Chair,
I agree.
Chair, can I assist? I did look at the parking zone on our website yesterday, and Albert Road is not included in that parking zone. Does that answer the question?
That is, the question is, that's the understanding of people here. So the question is, why does this, in this report to planning, say the contrary? Because there is a specific line. If you remove the last line, it's just a statement of fact. Chelsea Road is located within the MD parking zone, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, parking along Albert Road is restricted to 2 hours. It's the last sentence of that paragraph, I think, that the question is pertaining to.
I'll have another go at answering the question. Sorry if I didn't before. As a planning authority, we're guided by what we're told by the Highways Authority. We don't know if they have changed their criteria. If they have, that's their choice. We don't have any say in that. But I think the issue is from my perspective, is that isn't the determining factor in the acceptability of the highways and the parking issue.
Thank you. I've got a list. I've got Councillor Valley, then Councillor Candlish, and then Councillor Smythe. So I'll go in the order that people were asking the questions.
I was wondering about the likelihood of having food operatives at the bottom of these flats. I mean, I don't think we have any control over it, but I'd be fairly annoyed if I bought a flat and then found there was a curry house underneath.
Chair, so the government, trying to remember how many years ago, previous government anyway, very deliberately deregulated the use classes order a lot, so in creating Class E, and now that covers a huge range of what they call town centre uses, so shops, banks, building societies, cafes, restaurants, gyms, offices. So the potential occupiers is varied, but the government, consecutive governments in their wisdom have decided that that's an entirely acceptable approach, that the town centre occupier can have that degree of flexibility. The only things that, well, not the only things, but just to hopefully, it could become a restaurant. It can't become a takeaway, and it can't become a pub. Those are sui generis and need planning permission. But yes, the government's view is they want that deregulation and they want that flexibility to try and keep the vitality of and viability of these town centres.
Councillor Candlish, questions still? I've thrown you, haven't I? Because you want to make a comment.
You've thrown me there, Chair, because I was about to kind of try to answer a couple of things, but I now need to phrase it in the form of a question. So if there's someone else you can go to
Or you can wait.
I may have to wait until comments, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Smythe.
Would it be reasonable for us to put a condition on about WC and kitchenette in the shop area? It's just that I think it's a crucial site, this, and if we are maintaining a really quite large commercial space, this is a whole area of Southsea where a lot of little businesses start up. And to have a fight with the landlord over who's going to provide a loo or a kitchenette seems to me would put people off, and we could have the building vacant for a very long time. Rents are high. The cost of running a shop, even in Albert Road, is causing a churn at that end of the street, which I think is detrimental to the environment and to the amenity, and indeed adds to antisocial behaviour. So is it possible to put a condition on to say, look, show on the plans the provision of the facilities that anybody running anything there would need? Right, Mary?
Yes, it's certainly feasible to add that as a condition, Chair.
That's good.
Thank you very much. I mean, I'd just like to... no, I'll leave it later.
Yeah, comments later. Right, I'm still on questions. Has anyone else got any questions? Nope. I'm just checking whether I had any questions. I think they've all been covered. Okay, so now we'll go on to comments. I'm going to come to Councillor Candlish first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Hunt. You can now comment.
Okay, so I've clearly got some comments to say on the traffic side of it. But first of all, I think there is a real amenity aspect to decisions about parking, which as a planning committee we do have to take into account. And just about some facts about the KD zone. It is a large zone. There are 2,031 spaces. Sorry, my apologies. I've got the wrong thing written down in front of me. Yes. The parking zone to which we're referring to here is a very large one with over 2,000 spaces, but it is one of the most congested areas in the city. I do think there is an issue here, and I apologise if it's an error or it's a point of we need to get clearer. But the general rule is that Chelsea Road is part of the RPZ, but special rules apply to Albert Road. And if that is not the case, then I think we need to look at that, because there's a bigger principle about how we treat high streets across the city as opposed to residential roads. But I think, for me, that doesn't I agree also, however, that is in the grand scheme of things, a relatively small part of the overall decision that we're making about this is a planning application. In respect of the concerns about having fast food or takeaways or people hanging around outside, you know, it is evolving. There's been no sign of any change from the government from the previous administration's views about these uses of high streets. Locally, we can do some things to guide where people go and basically have enforcement of places where they should not go. But it is true that these places can cause disruption. It depends on what unit goes in and the management of that. That is something beyond the scope of this planning committee to really address. And if we're on comments, I'll now actually try to talk to the application that's in front of me rather than sort of more broadly. I think this is a really good application. I think this is the right way to go. It looks like if we are going to have a national policy of densification of our urban areas, this is the sort of scheme we're going to have to do. It's taking an existing property and extending it in a way that carries forward what was there before, I think in a relatively sympathetic way. It does result in more shadowing. There are negatives associated with it, but it is also creating more space in a really good area. And I think, going back to the traffic point of view, it's the type of place which is most likely to be attracting a relatively lower use of cars than some other places. So net, I will be supporting this this recommendation. Indeed, I will propose it.
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't you just propose it? Okay. Councillor Hunt.
Well, I'm seconding that. I mean, you know, sometimes, just sometimes, you get an application that comes up to you and it just says, build me, build me, build me. I mean, one of the things, and you mentioned it, Jake, is it's paying homage to the 1950s. Now, you know, I think younger people now aren't necessarily interested in the Victorian period or something, but this is a really great 1950s form of utilitarianism, where it was a revival from the early 1900s in the 1950s. And the Crittall windows came in, and they were a feature of the 1950s. And you can see a lot of it up when you go around the streets up in Cosham, for example. You'll see a lot of Crittall windows. And people like, younger people, I'm sure, they like this. And we know that modern design can make them better than they used to be, because they tend to bend a little bit and so on. But the way that this, the development sits on the recipient property, it just screams an iconic building now. And I'm so grateful for the people who have designed it, because we're going to see some 1950s, at long last, we're going to see some 1950s heritage, part of Portsmouth's culture and history over a long time, conserved into the future. Now, I was always worried about Erin Jervis when, you know, and how it might go, but they're retaining all the tiling on the front, everything, and it's just a very exciting, it's going to be an iconic building, and people are going to want to live there. And by Jove, along Albert Road, if you're looking for a shop premises, you just can't get one. You really just cannot. The competition is enormous, so the shop unit, whatever it's going to be, is going to be filled up very quickly. And I'm sure that the landlords and whatnot will sort out the loo or whatnot. They really will. But yes, I'm just so pleased to see it. I love the symmetry. I love the way it rises up. It doesn't. It's a corner building, so it can be a taller building. I mean, and to see the 1950s at long last have a feature building in our city is just tremendous. And I've always wanted to say this, and I always said that we should be looking at streets up in Cosham and so on, and maybe putting, as you can tell, I'm enthusiastic.
We're bottling it.
Yeah. Up in the, you know, some streets in Cosham and conserve them because they are 1950s style or 1930s. I mean, you don't see it often enough, but congratulations to everybody involved in this. The symmetry, the style in this is it just screams at you, and I don't doubt that people are going to want to live in these, and they can be quite spacious too. I did look at the harm to next door, but I listened very clearly to what the officer said, and he said nobody from next door has complained behind, and they're going to put in these opaque, obscure windows to that one window in any event. So what's not to like about it? Let's just say yes.
I'm taking that to you seconding it.
Oh yes, I'd like to have proposed it.
Yeah,
So
I know.
yeah, I'm looking forward to
Okay.
seeing it built. I really am.
Councillor Smythe, and then I'll come to Councillor Mason.
I think there's very little more from it. I was going to second it, but I do think we need the condition about the loo and the kitchenette, please, and I hope we can put something in on that. And I would like to have the reference to MD parking zone. I maybe need to say that I live in the MD parking zone as well, Juliet. I hope it's not a problem. I'm not very near. But when you add up the other problems we have in this area, and anybody living in this area has to get used to the enormous amounts of traffic we get whenever there's a sellout scheme at the sellout at the King's Theatre. This, I'm not surprised it's difficult to park here in the centre of a hubbing centre of
A vibrant centre.
vibrant even, yes, lively.
Let her have her words.
Vibrant, lively and busy, and sometimes it has its street troubles and things. But I do think that confusion, we should take out the reference to, this is an Albert Road property, and at the moment the policy is not to allow their use between 4:30 and 6 in the MD zone, which is either side of Albert Road here, should be taken out. What the transport people decide to do in the long run with those two areas, which will always cause a bit of difficulty, and the shoppers, shopping premises, their shops up and down the road, the South Sea traders don't like the restrictions either. It is worth, I think, taking that out. If we could condition that, I'd be very grateful, because what the transport people decide later is a different matter.
I've got that on the list. Councillor Mason,
Thank you.
and then I'll come to Councillor Candish.
This puts me on the horns of a dilemma. I too, like Councillor Hunt, like the early 1950s buildings, the Festival of Britain style, the lightness of it. However, this is not Festival of Britain style. It looks like an industrial building. It was an industrial building. I don't think it sits easily in the street scene or in Albert Road. I don't like it. But quite frankly, I can see no planning reasons to refuse this application. And so it puts me in a very peculiar position. I don't like it, but I can't see any good reason to vote against it.
Thank you. Councillor Candish. Councillor Smythe, you've got your mic on still.
Oh, sorry.
That's
I'm
fine.
so
No worries.
So it's just a very small technical point. There will be a TRO in existence that will define, because it goes to a map, whether this property is or is not part of the zone. So that it will just be a fact that we need to establish. After we establish that fact, we may need to do something about it. But in terms of making this decision, we have to understand that that's where the position is at the moment.
That's useful.
And I'm checking as we speak.
Okay. Councillor.
I checked yesterday, and Albert Road is not listed within the streets under that parking zone.
Yeah.
I understand what the maps show, but actually the legal document is the TRO, and it will not be the first time that a building was there was a difference on these types of corners. I'm just cautioning.
I think if parking was the issue that we were focusing on debating, I think it would be worth maybe deferring, but I don't think it is the issue. We just want the clarity. So, Councillor Dent, did you want to say anything? No? Because everyone else has spoken. Just to add my bit to it, this is exactly what I meant when I said before, but sometimes I get frustrated with the overdevelopment of particular buildings, particularly the ground floor. So this, for me, is a positive application, because you keep the commercial and you improve the rest, so it's like a win-win. And for what it's worth, I really like the windows. I really think it's a very attractive, both externally and looking at the plans will be really high standard accommodation internally. So it's really nice to have these applications come before us and for us to be able to celebrate them. So we only have one proposal in front of us by Councillor Candish, seconded by Councillor Hunt, with a proposal to add a condition around making sure that the removed WC kitchen area, in order to provide the facilities, is actually relocated somewhere else on that ground floor for the use of the commercial aspect of it. And I don't know whether this needs to be a condition, but I don't know how we can capture our feelings around the parking. I think the key point is, before it gets to a point where it's marketed, that it's really, really clear. And whether that needs to be amended from this report, because someone in the future might go back to the planning that was approved and then cite that. I just think we do need to get some advice on that one.
It'll be in the minutes that we just note that Albert Road is not within parking zone MD.
Okay, I'm happy with that, rather than going down a conditions route.
I think you can only say that we believe, because you absolutely have to go back to the original document. We've had issues with this elsewhere. That's why I'm making the
Okay, the minutes will say that we believe it, subject to checking it. No marketing to happen until it's clarified. Yes.
And Chair, just the amendment to condition 7 about which window was to be obscure glaze, which I described at the start.
And that amendment. Yes. Okay, with those things considered, all those in favour? And that's, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I forgot to say it. 6. All those against? 0. And 1 abstention. In which case, I'm very happy to say that officers' recommendations have been approved and planning permission is granted. Thank you. Do we need a quick comfort break? Or do we want to plough on? We've got 2 more.
You'll have to excuse me. I've got to go home to my mother-in-law at the moment.
Okay.
Thanks, okay.
Thank you very much, Jake. So,
Can I propose we continue, because actually one of them looks quite short.
yes. Okay, I'm happy to. I just wanted to check. So Councillor Hunt is now leaving the meeting. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 6, which is 2A Newcomen Road. And Sam is presenting, yeah? Over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So we've got an application for change of use from C3 to either C3 or C4. Just for absolute clarity before we start, the application came in as purely just C3 to C4 and was amended during the application process at the request of the applicant. As we saw this to be a betterment to the scheme, there wasn't any re-advertising of the scheme. So Newcomen Road is sort of in the Stamshore area of Portsmouth. As you see, it's on the far eastern side of Newcomen Road. And as you can see, it's that end of terrace property, slightly unusual in that it's got a dormer on the front, also a dormer on the rear that we'll see later. Integral garage and living accommodation on the 1st and 2nd floors. As you can see, no HMOs were picked up during the count, so this would be the first known HMO, which would give you a percentage of 1.4, which is well below the 10% threshold in the SPD. And so, existing elevations, as you see, it's got the integral garage and largely blank elevation on the rear. Just for clarity, on the existing floor plans, you'll see that there's a garage on the ground floor. This garage has been measured against the standards that are contained within the parking SPD, and the width is approximately 2.7 metres. Parking SPD gives a width of 3 metres for an integral garage, so it would fall short of the requirements for a garage to be used at the moment. So some minor fenestration changes, which would be the removal of that garage and making good of that front elevation to match the existing with a window that you can see there, and also a high-level window serving the amenity area at the ground floor. And those 3 side windows are as existing, so no changes there. So accommodation is made up of the amenity area at the ground floor, 2 single occupancy bedrooms at the first floor and a double occupancy bedroom at the second floor. You'll all be familiar with the 22.5 square metre requirement for amenity areas for properties where all rooms are above 10 square metres for single occupancy, 14 for double occupancy. The private sector housing document also offers a amenity space for where there's between 3 and 5 occupants, and that standard is 15.5, so the 17.7 that is provided here is in excess of the requirements. Just some photos of the internals. I think you can just see the rear dormer as well. So I think that is everything. So I think we now have deputation.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just falling into the pictures then. Okay, so we have, I don't think Councillor Fazakerley has come. So we've got Jeffrey Gibbs, who is the applicant. I'm really sorry you've had to wait so long, but if there'd been no deputations for the other ones, we would have put it earlier. But you have 6 minutes, Jeffrey.
Good afternoon. So yeah, I'm the director of Main Fix Properties. This is my property. I understand some of the concerns at the proposed HMO, but I want to begin acknowledging the concerns for the community cohesions. Parking, noise, property standards, valid issues, I'll get it, and I'll take them very seriously. However, I believe the proposal of the responsible and balanced solution to growing housing needs in the area. The demand for affordable, flexible accommodation is rising for young professionals and key workers, and all others who contribute to the local economy, but are priced out of the traditional housing. This HMO has been carefully designed to meet all licensing and safety standards. It will include high quality amenities, correct waste management, and upgrade of sound insulation. The measures has been incorporated to minimise all and any potential impact of parking traffic, such as bike storage and support for sustainable transport options. The transport options either end of the road. So we've got Stampshaw Road and we've got Stampshaw Road at one end. Forgive me for that one. And importantly, I'm committed to being a responsible and management and landlord. That means regular maintenance, clear tenant agreements and zero tolerance policy of antisocial behaviour. I want this property to be an asset to the neighbourhood, not a burden. I respectfully ask the committee to consider a broader context. This is not about lowering standards, but meeting all housing needs in the way that is safe, regulated and community-minded. A couple of other bits. I first purchased this property because I'd love the look of it, and it's very, very unique to a New Common Road. It hasn't a garden, so one of my reasons I'm going down the road of the potential HMO, if I was a family, for instance, buying a house without a garden, it doesn't make too much sense to me. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it falls nicely to other individual accommodation, if you like. A bit of history about the property, reason why I purchased it as well. I believe it's an old mews. It's like a stable transport back in just before the 1900s, I believe, which again is cool. It's a cool asset, I believe. The garage space it's not being used as a garage for any transport. It's too small. So other than that, I believe hopefully everyone's understanding on where I'm coming from in this proposal. Any other questions I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Geoffrey, for that. We haven't got Councillor Fazackerley, so that's the end of the deputations. So I'll go to members for questions. If there are any, of course. I don't have any questions. Are there any questions? Do we need clarity on anything? I have one question actually about, I probably need to look a little bit closer. Do we have any visuals on the amenity room in terms of lights? I can see it both ends. Is there anything along the edge of the building?
So
It's
it
very
can't have any windows on the side because you've got the garage of the neighbouring property. Yeah, there's no windows on the side because that's where the garage of the neighbouring property is. So it's got the...
So we've got windows one end, windows the other
so
end.
it's at the north and the south end, there are windows. That high-level window at the rear was added at opposite request to increase the level of light that occupiers would have when using the amenity space.
Okay. That's my only question. Anyone else got any questions? No. Okay, so comments. I go to Councillor Smythe.
I'd like to propose this for approval. I mean, it's an unusual house, and it's interesting that the applicant has preserved all the idiosyncrasy of the front of the house that that is currently there. I'm particularly pleased to see such a big room for the laundry and the bicycles, and also, I guess, other things could, if there were some cupboards in there, be stored that would take pressure off the amenity room. But it is only 4 people, and it's a nice, long, usable space. I think probably there is adequate lighting from both sides, and I'd like to propose this for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Vallely, you don't want to comment? Just 1 second. Any comments from the other 3 councillors here? Councillor Mason.
Just a comment that peculiar property like that, this is quite difficult to deal with. And I think that the applicant has made a very sensible division of space. And I think it is a laudable application.
Thank you. No other comments? I would just say, I mean, I agree with those points. It is an unusual property, and whilst it's not a planning consideration, I really appreciate you coming along and doing a deputation and communicating your commitment for it being a high-quality HMO. I think that is a really good thing for us to hear, whilst we can't actually just, that's not a material planning consideration, it's just nice to hear. So I think then we'll go straight to a vote then. So we have a proposal from Councillor Smythe, seconded by Councillor Vallely. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? And any abstentions? 1 abstention. Okay, so that means that officers' recommendations have been approved and planning permission is granted. Thank you again for staying all that length of time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we go on to the final agenda item, which is agenda item 7, which is 19 Meredith Road, which is an application for a certificate of lawful development for the proposed construction of a single-storey rear extension followed removal of existing conservatory. Okay, is it Sam again? We'll go over to you then, Sam.
Thank you very much. Just for clarity, obviously, we don't have too many lawfulness certificates determined by the committee. This one's here because the applicant is a member of staff at PCC, so otherwise this would normally have been done under delegated powers. So as you see, it's a corner property on Meredith Road and Brunel Road. We're happy that this extension wouldn't front the highway. as you see from the existing plans, at the rear of the property, there's a combination of brick-built and conservatory-style extensions, which are to be replaced with one flat roof-style extension. And here's just a floor plan of existing. And so you can see here, it's on exactly the same footprint as the existing collection of extensions and additions to the property, just would be a flat roof with a couple of roof lights. And yeah, just to clarify that the footprint of it would be exactly the same. We're satisfied that all the requirements for permitted development for an extension are met, so matching materials. The depth is okay, the height is adequate, so everything accords with the permitted development guidelines, and therefore we're of the opinion that the certificate should be granted. And just to clarify what it looks like at the moment, and yeah, we're going to be a flat roof with a matching brick to tie in with the existing property.
Any comments?
Chair, I would just add, I think it's unfortunate that the scheme of delegation lacks the clarity for us to be able to delegate a decision on something as straightforward as this, even for a member of staff, because it's simply a matter of fact about whether it's permitted development or not, where it fits within the regulations. So at some point it would be helpful to get some clarity into the scheme of delegation to so that we don't necessarily need to take these where it's simply a matter of fact, and there could be no question of our bias or anything in relation to a member of staff, because we're simply determining whether it's a factually complies rather than a planning merit assessment.
So the recommendation is to grant lawful development certificate of proposed development. Do we need a proposer and a seconder? Yes, as normal. Okay, I'll propose. Anyone second? Councillor Mason. Sorry, it could have been anyone.
Yep.
Shall we vote on this? Oh, sorry, do you want to comment?
Comment on that, looking at what is at the back there now and what is proposed, this is certainly an upgrading and an improvement. And so I have no hesitation in seconding your proposal.
Okay, we'll go to a vote then. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All 6 of us, unanimous. So that is granted. And that brings us to the end of our meeting for today. So thank you very much to everyone for your questions, comments, and thanks to officers for the reports. Have a good rest of the day.